So I'm really excited for this video because I've been actually wanting to do this for a while. So one of the most common questions I get from makers is, what background do I use? And the question is really good. It's a really important question to ask because your background really matters in your product photography and getting noticed online. So the thing that I wanted to do was photograph a product with a number of different backgrounds. And I wanted to see how the background changed the way the product looked and felt. I also wanted to see if it changed the perceived value of the product. That is, did the product look cheap or did it look more expensive and high quality? So if you want to check out what backgrounds I go over and which ones were the winners and which ones were kind of like the losers, make sure you stay tuned. And if we have never met, hello, my name is Imelda Jimenez Lamar, and I'm a product photography coach helping handmade sellers learn how to shoot product photos that sell online. And before we dive into these product photos and we go over all of the things, I encourage you to just experiment with different backgrounds. You may discover that the background you're using is maybe not the best. So I hope some of these backgrounds that I present to you can open you up to maybe trying them and doing something different. Because in all honesty, you'll never know if it's actually going to work great for your products unless you try it. So let's dive into these product photos and get into what works and what doesn't work and what my final thoughts are. All right, so I used this pin or brooch for this example because I thought it would be easy to photograph against a bunch of different backgrounds, and it's also got a lot going on in the sense that it has a lot of detail. It has little sparklies on it, even though it's honestly falling apart. Some of the things have fallen off it, but you know what, I thought it'd be a good thing to photograph and try out for this kind of exercise that I wanted to do. So I'm going to be thinking about a couple different questions as I'm going through the different product photos. So first, does a product pop against the background? You want to make sure it's easy to see your product. You want to make sure that it stands out from your background. That's really important, especially when you're selling online, because you want to get noticed. You want your customers to see what you're selling and not have to guess or try and figure out what they're looking at. So yes, does a product pop against the background? This question I think is going to be really interesting, and that is, does the product look cheap or expensive? Your background's really important, and oddly enough, you can really make your product look cheap and inexpensive, which is really not ideal, especially when you're creating handmade products, right? So it'll be really interesting looking at the backgrounds to see how the perceived value changes depending on which background I'm showing you. And then just overall, how would you rate this? Do you think this is, a good background for this particular product, or do you think, we should go with something different? So I encourage you to think about the question of, does the product pop against the background, and does the product look cheap or expensive in relation to your particular product photos, what backgrounds you're choosing, because these are really important to think about, especially the perceived value of your product, because that's what customers are looking at. They're looking at your product photos and they're thinking, is this worth the money? Is this product look well made? Is it look quality, or does it look cheap? And do I think it's worth the money that this person is charging for? So yeah, be sure you kind of write these questions down and reflect on your own product photos and see what you come up with. So let's get started. So wood is a very popular background for a lot of makers, and I wanted to include a couple wood backgrounds in this exercise or in these examples. So the first one is a dark wood background, and this other one is a light, warmer background of wood. So this first one definitely has more lines, it has a lot more texture going on, whereas the one in the middle, this warmer yellow toned wood, is much smoother. It doesn't have as much texture, and you can still see the lines of the wood. So first question, does the product pop against the background? I would say they do. They both pop against the different wood backgrounds. Now, does the product look cheap or expensive? I would definitely say the dark wood background, I personally think, cheapens the product, because when I'm looking at the product has these like interesting curves and different like lines. It's sparkly. It's just, you know, kind of this like pretty thing, right? And the background just looks very rustic, very worn in, and you could probably argue that you like the contrast, like you bring this kind of like you have this like how would I say, kind of like this organic-y, rustic thing, this background, this wood background, whereas your product is completely sort of the opposite. That can work, but I think in this case it's just really, it doesn't work. It doesn't go, and I think it's really bringing down the perceived value of the product itself. In regards to the lighter wood, I think it's definitely better. I think the background's more subtle, so I think the product itself looks better. I think the perceived value is higher for sure, but I don't think in general it's doing a whole lot to really showcase the product. So I would say overall, I would pass on this dark wood background. And I could probably argue that you could get by with this warmer wood background. It's not my favorite, but you know, you could probably use this one and be fine. So, and let me know what you think. And lastly, this shot on the right is a kind of brown craft paper tone piece of paper. It's actually seamless paper, and I think it definitely pops against this background. I think it really stands out. I think honestly better than these wood backgrounds. Okay, so does the product look cheap or expensive? I think it definitely looks more expensive. I think it really just lets the product take center stage. I think it's clean, it's kind of very minimalist, and I think overall looks a lot better. So for sure, hands down, I would go with this beige background for this particular product, because it just, I think, fits the look of what I think this product should be, and that would attract customers more online than if the product was photographed against these two backgrounds. But let me know what you think. Okay, so this next set of photos, they're backgrounds that are totally different. They have this sort of like warm, kind of like grayish blue tone to it. So this first photo on the right, I'm sorry, not on the right, on the left it's a vinyl background, and it has this interesting sort of pattern going on. It's very subtle, and I thought it was an interesting background to photograph different products with. I actually bought it online. I'll leave a link below if you want to check it out. The website, which I can't remember off the top of my head, has a ton of different backgrounds, and they're geared towards, you know, product photographers, food photographers, that type of thing. So be sure to check it out. This one in the middle is actually a scarf that I decided to use as the background. And this last one is seamless paper that's gray toned. So I would say overall, these products, this product does pop against these three different backgrounds. I think more so this gray one on the right, I think pops better. I think with the fabric in the middle, the scarf, it feels a little dark, and I'm a little distracted with the texture. I think, I don't know, it's a little distracting to me. So the big question, does the product look cheap or expensive? I would say, I think in general, they all have a higher perceived value for sure compared to like the previous photos that we looked at. And I think they all could work. I think none of them are really dragging down the perceived value. My only thing is with this center shot with the scarf background, it just feels a little off to me. I don't know, it feels kind of off to me. So how would I overall, rate these backgrounds? Do I think they're good? Would I use them, or would I go with something else? I think the more I look at these photos, the more I think I would probably pass on this scarf kind of gray textured background. I think it just doesn't quite go. I don't know, I feel like it's not doing a whole lot. Whereas I think, honestly, I think the gray one is complementing the product really, really well. I think this is a great background to go with for this particular product. I think this other background on the left, I think it works. But I think if I'm looking at, all of these, I think honestly, this gray background I think is the best and would be the one I would go with. So that's what my thoughts are. Let me know what you think. Okay, so here's the next set of photos with some very different backgrounds than we've looked at so far. So at first glance, does the product pop against these backgrounds? And I would say no. These backgrounds are much busier. These, the one in the center and the one on the left are also scarves that have a lot going on, really interesting detail and patterns and stuff going on. And this one on the right is actually petrified wood. It's a charcuterie board that I thought, hey, let's use this as a background and see how it goes. So all of these backgrounds just are way too busy, and the product doesn't really pop out. It makes it really difficult to see the product because the product itself is detailed, it has a lot going on, and the backgrounds also have a lot of detail and have a lot going on. So when you put that together, it's just a visual mess, and I think these backgrounds are just not great. Does the product look cheap or expensive? I mean, if you can't even see the product, it makes it really hard to decide whether it looks like the product looks cheap or if it looks expensive. I think maybe this like wood background, you could argue it looks a little more expensive because it has this like a really clean background, even though it's visually busy. But in all honesty, I think on some level, does it really matter when you are struggling to see the product? So I think overall, I would definitely pass on all of these backgrounds. These are not good backgrounds for this particular product. You could maybe get by if it was a solid, very clean product that, didn't have a lot going on, didn't have different tones of colors going on. So yeah, this is going to be a pass for me for sure. All right, let's brighten things up with some color backgrounds. So we have red, yellow, and green. And, I think these are really fun and colorful backgrounds for sure. And I would say 100% these backgrounds really help the product pop. Like they stand out because the product itself is, kind of the silver, black, and it just really, really shines. Does a product look cheap or expensive? I honestly feel like I like these colors. I don't think these are the right color shades for this product. I feel like it looks a bit cheap, in all honesty. Because I guess with this brooch, I think of something classy. I think of something very kind of like minimalist. I don't think of like a really colorful background. It just doesn't, to me, go, and it doesn't translate very well. These could maybe work if they were different tones of the colors. I think maybe if they were really light, but I think using a really bold color to me is sort of making the product look a little bit cheap. I don't know. I really would love to know what you think, because I don't know. It's just not working for me. How would I rate these backgrounds? Do I think they're good for this particular product? I don't think so, in all honesty. I think they just don't go with the look and the feel I think of when I look at this product. So I would definitely probably pass on these. So sorry, the bold colors are just not doing it for me. All right, so we're down to our last three. So we have the classic white, which a lot of people use a white background for their product photos. It is the standard across the board for a lot of product photography. And we have this blue background, and then we have the black. So does the product pop against these different backgrounds? I would say yes. I think all the backgrounds really help the product pop. Does a product look cheap or expensive? So this is I think going to be really interesting. So I think white in general can make a product look expensive, right? It's just void of all color. It really just helps spotlight the product. So I think it does look more expensive compared to a lot of the other backgrounds we've looked at. Regarding the blue and the black, to me, they feel a little bit cheap. They feel, I think with the blue, it's very similar to the previous photos we looked at with the red, the yellow, and the green, in that I think the tone is just not right. I think if it was a really light blue or maybe a really dark navy blue, it might work, but it just doesn't go to me. It just doesn't. I feel like it looks a little bit cheap, and I think it is the tone, it's the shade of blue. And regarding black, I know a lot of makers sometimes will gravitate towards black, especially when they're selling jewelry and accessories like that are similar to this brooch. And I get it, you're wanting the product to really pop and stand out. And I think the automatic assumption is to use the black, that it'll really help the product stand out, which it does. But it just, to me, is just so dark. It feels heavy to me. And I don't think it's making the product itself look its best. I think it does on some level make the product look a little more expensive, but I think it's just not, I don't think it's doing as well as what some of the other backgrounds were doing and really helping the product look really great and look its best. So overall, how would I rate these backgrounds? I would definitely say white background is classic. I think it's good. I think it works for this particular product, like pretty much any other product against a white background. I think it's definitely a good one to go with. The blue, I would pass. You know, it just, I don't know, it just kind of looks cheap and just doesn't scream to me, hey, come buy me. And the black, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna like pass on it. I think having looked at the other backgrounds, there were some better contenders for sure, and I think the black just is too heavy. It's swallowing up the product too much, and you know, I think it doesn't quite work. So those are my thoughts. Comment below and let me know what your favorite background was. So before I wrap up this video, I actually want to leave you with just a couple tips to keep in mind when it comes to selecting a background for your product photos. So the first one I already talked a lot about, but I think it is worth listening to, and that is just to make sure that your background helps highlight and make your product pop. because the more easier it is for your customers to see what you make and sell, the more likely they're going to want to click on your listing and potentially buy from you. So make it really easy on them. Remember, we have very short attention spans when we're scrolling online. So make it really easy and find a background that really complements and makes your product look amazing. The other thing that I think we really saw in this video is how much a background can change the perceived value of a product. And I see a lot of makers photographing their products against different backgrounds and uploading it to a listing. And while you think this might be very helpful, as we saw in this video, we saw that sometimes the background just kind of made the product look cheaper and just really lowered the perceived value of the product. So you don't want to be doing that. You don't want to have a customer clicking through your product photos and feeling like, oh, the product looks kind of cheap and low quality in some of these photos, but then it looks really nice in some other photos. So I honestly think you should just stick with one background when it comes to photographing your products, because you'll have that consistency. And if you find a really great background, I mean, it'll make your products look really great and more appealing to customers to want to buy. So I definitely would go that route if I were you. So I hope this video was really helpful for you and that you learned a lot and, maybe walked away with a couple different background ideas you can try. So comment below, let me know what your thoughts are, especially what product photo background you thought looked best. And that's all for today, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.